Up there. There we go. Yay! Hello. I only fucked up tech-wise once. Let's go. Hello there, me. You can see my thighs in all of my glory, and for once I'm actually wearing a jacket IRL. Big jacket fan. It has finally gotten cold enough for me to be able to actually wear the clothing I like instead of just lame pairs of pants and t-shirts. There is fuck all you can do with interesting combinations of plain work pants and t-shirts, but jackets are nice. Hello, anyone watching. Welcome, me, ladies, gentlemen, me of the future, the void, as always. Today's stream will be relatively short for my standards because I just remembered the new Genshin update came out. Wait, it was all Cutter? Indeed, World of Light, it was all Cutter all along. And, yeah, why that's relevant. Hot lady in suit. So I have things to explore there and pulls to do. But hey, look, still gotta get a stream in, still wanna yap a little bit before I have to disappear for the Hololive concert, which I'm very much looking forward to. I'm going with an IRL friend. And then, of course, tomorrow I should be doing the hard mode stages. It looks like they are actually out. And yes, I will try to use Cutter in at least some of them. She should be pretty good for this event. That being said, today I'm just going to yap a little bit about some of my work stories. Because I had to think about these ahead of time because, some of my jobs I can't share. For reasons where, like, best case scenario, it doxes me. Worst case, there are a lot worse cases than me just accidentally doxing myself by sharing my employment history naturally. So I needed to stop and actually think about it for a second. But I've gone through and thought of some of the work stories I can share about myself and my colleagues. And I want to preface this by saying I have been around the block a little bit. I've had quite a few different methods of employment. I was very briefly a dock worker. Very, very briefly a model for like 1 week. That was it. It's not fun. And I'm not attractive either. That's not the point of modeling. I've been a cook, a real estate agent, a part-time florist. That one was actually fun, except for my ridiculous allergies. A barista, a waiter. I've worked at a shooting range. I've done a whole bunch of paperwork as an administrative clerk. I have unfortunately been a team lead very briefly. I do have one fun story that came out of that. But I was very, very keen to no longer be a team lead as soon as that was possible. Hello, Sam. Welcome. I've missed you a little as well. And yeah, the list is not even close to done. I've also done acting, voice acting, musicals. This is what I mean. I believe I mentioned previously, there is a chance people would recognize me. It's just very low because obviously they weren't blockbusters or anything important. I've been a programmer. I've been a software analyst. I have been a cleaner, but my first time cleaning someone's room, it was filled with a ridiculous amount of mold, and I got sick and quit. Basically, as a quick summary, I've worked a lot of jobs, some of which are just really, really silly. Anime girl voice update. Okay, full disclosure, I was trying to do that. I was working on that. I've been trying to find a voice modifier that can make me sound like an anime girl because I thought it would be really, really funny. But unfortunately, because of the deep booming bass, which, by the way, this is my normal talking voice, I just get very excited. Yeah, so not a lot of modifiers are very good at turning that into a high-pitched anime voice. I can do some falsetto, but not consistently, not with much range. So I could make myself sound like an anime girl. But I think the funniest job titles I've ever held are freelance smut author. I made a decent chunk of money from that. That was good fun. What are the other really fun ones? Oh yeah, I was part of an armored escort convoy. That sucked. The pay was so bad. And yeah, it is amusing to think that it's considered a prank for this VTuber model to have a female voice. But I am still looking into it. I think that would be very, very funny to do. What else have I gotten that was really, really fun? Basically, I've been around the block when it comes to work. There's a decent chance any job title you think of, I've at least been adjacent or know someone who has done it. It would surprise you to hear me with a voice changer. I mean, I could just do like a high-pitched Shota voice for a little bit if you wanted to. My voice acting range isn't super amazing, especially not with higher register, but because it's funny, I have been learning to speak with falsetto. I still have a long way to go. But the goal is to eventually sound like a dainty anime waif so that I can really mess with people if I ever get big enough that strangers would just occasionally appear. And then just completely flashbang them. Hey there. It's your local anime girl. How's things? And I've thought of a few different stories I can safely share without doxing myself. And if you have any own stories from your own life you want to share while I'm doing them, feel free to chuck them in chat or Discord. I'll read through them and see if they're interesting. I think to start us off, let's set the tone. Nice and standardized one. So one time, one of my coworkers got really, really bored and wanted to motivate himself to run more. So he did what any sane person would do and snorted like a full cup of pre-workout. First of all, way more than you should be having in a single serving. Second of all, it's meant to be ingested, not through your nose. His heart rate was so high we thought he was going to have a heart attack. I And then he just decided, like, it definitely worked to a degree. He had enough energy, his heart rate was going fast enough that he went for like a 50-minute jog, just like a sprint, because his heart rate was already at like 160, almost heart attack levels. It's a miracle he didn't have a fucking stroke and die. He didn't tell anyone he was doing it either. We found out after he got back from the run, covered in sweat, looking like he'd been like tied to the back of someone's car and dragged across the road. Except instead of damaging the skin, it becoming roadkill, he'd just gotten sweatier and sweatier. A different car-related story, actually. Solid segue, go me. As one of my jobs as part of the armored escort convoy, we were required to do basic fitness testing to make sure that first off we could lift the really heavy boxes, because you're either generally escorting massive sums of cash or ammunition or something sensitive that you don't want people taking. But the way they pack that, like, a box of ammo is like 60 kilos. Unless you break it down into the smaller tins, which are only like 5 to 10 kilos. And basically they just wanted to check everyone at a certain bench line of fitness. And while we were all waiting for the running test, which is the very first of the, I think it was 5 different quick tests they did, one person was running late. The instructor. And when he rocked up, like, oh, sorry, not the instructor, the instructor's assistant. They had to have 2 people certify it. It's pretty standard when it comes to armored convoy stuff. You need 2 people for basically everything. Especially handover of weapons or large sums of cash, because it's just less likely that 2 people will commit fraud. So we were getting really pissed off. We were going, hey, we're all raring to go. We want to get this out of the way and done with. Where's the assistant? Rocks up, riding a push bike, a very damaged push bike, and tells us that on the way to work, he got hit by a car. And instead of calling a hospital, despite the car basically totaling his bike, he got back on the bike and continued and then just went about his day. My guy wasn't built different, he was built stupid. But I will say it was very good motivation for all of us to pass the fitness test, because, like, if this motherfucker is running the fitness test with us after doing a 20-kilometer bike to work and getting hit by a car on the way, any of us doing worse than him would be humiliating. So he'll put in quite a little bit more effort than we otherwise would have. One other one, this wasn't work related, but this was very, very funny. Last year I went to an anime convention with the IRL friend I'm going to the Hololive convention with, Hololive concert with this weekend. It was a local anime convention, a very small one. And for whatever reason, OzGeo decided, hey, you know what? We're the, I forget what it stands for, Geospatial Int? Yeah, Geospatial Intelligence. So Australian Geospatial Intelligence Office decided, hey, you know what we really want to start a recruitment drive? The local weebs. Maybe some of them will actually be geniuses. So, in the midst of all of these cosplayers, some fat sweaty nerds, you know the type, you've all seen them, some very, very fit Giga Chad nerds, mainly a lot of cosplayers, a lot of women not wearing much. They just rocked up, dressed to the nine in incredibly formal suits, like think cravat level formal, and they just looked like they were regretting their life decisions. And I feel kind of bad for the workers, but it was very, very funny. You're studying for the exam, I'll use my stream for relaxation. Hey, glad to be of assistance then, Asian boy. Or do you want me to nickname you as Dab? I can do that if you'd like. Yeah. I've never seen two better dressed people look like they regretted their life more. Out of pity and morbid curiosity, I went over to talk to them. They gave me a mandated spiel trying to recruit me to yeah, I forget the acronym. The Australian Geospatial Intelligence Organisation. I think it is OzGeo. Yeah. And they were just... They were going through the motions. You could tell they knew I was just messing with them. They knew there was 0% chance of me doing anything with that information. They were so miserable because they were stuck there on a weekend as well, so they were being forced to do overtime to try and convince a bunch of weebs to sign up for OzGeo. But I didn't walk away empty-handed. I did convince them, they had a whole bunch of like pens and stress balls that they gave people to act as like merch and encourage them to apply. And they were just like, yeah, look, you can just take whatever you want. We know no one else is coming by. And sure enough, like, I think in the entire convention, me and my friend were 2 of 5 people who ended up like visiting their stall. And they were probably glad for that because, look, let's just say they, like, I don't even know why they bothered to show up. The 2 people who were there very clearly knew it was a stupid idea. Just, damn, where can we get the brightest minds to hire into OzGeo? I know, let's go down to WeebCon 2020. But back to work stories rather than just a fun thing I saw one time. Some of my coworkers over my different jobs have been psychopaths in the funny way. I mean, I started with a story of someone snorting pre-workout. Just to throw my hat in the ring, I'm not immune to being a dumbass. I was also a young man once upon a time. So here is one of my stories of being a dumbass. So we were going camping, right? It was part of our job. It wasn't like a for fun camping or anything. We had very limited amounts of what we could bring. And this is one of the jobs I can't really go into what it was because there's no way I can phrase it that wouldn't make it very, very easy to dox me because there's only a couple of companies who do this. So we were going camping as a massive group. We had incredibly, incredibly limited supplies. And I didn't want to bring a tent, so I didn't. And it was in the middle of winter, so basically, all I had was a sleeping bag. And I was fine. But look, I understand the looks everyone gave me when it would get down to negative 15 degrees and I would pop out of my sleeping bag sleeping on the ground, no mat, no nothing, just being like, I bet what's happening, what's the plan for the day? While they would crawl out looking miserable, rubbing their hands together from their well-insulated tents. And honestly, I was pretty cold once I was out of the sleeping bag. I'm just such a walking furnace that, while I was inside the sleeping bag, it was quite toasty. I actually had to, like, pop parts of my body out into the frigid winter air because otherwise I would overheat. Where men, all we need is a sleeping bag. Yeah, I definitely, play into that stereotype. This morning it was, 3 degrees as I was walking to work. And I made the mistake of taking a jacket. And I had to go back to my car and put my jacket away. And I was struggling to not be shirtless. I didn't want to subject anyone to that, but it was foggy 3 degrees and I was walking very lightly and just my internal body heat. Like I wasn't even sweating. It was just my base body heat. It was so high. It's a couple times in the middle of winter when I've gone to hang out washing or bring in washing at midnight. I've gone out shirtless, wearing nothing but a pair of shorts and a pair of thongs. Because just my internal body heat sometimes just decides, fuck you. Starts massively overproducing literal furnace. Yeah, it's winter there. Yeah, basically. Around Anzac Day each year, we start having winter instead of summer. We only have 2 seasons. God save you, go to bed ice cold and wake up in a localized furnace. Yeah, you understand me, Sam. Just like you, for real, for real. Hello, Muffin with Nothing. Welcome, welcome. I'm just yapping about some of the fun things I've done in my working career. You did not own casual pants, ice and snow shorts is fine. Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a male thing. The desire to walk out in a pair of thongs, shorts, and nothing else. In the middle of winter at midnight. And then everyone being like, hey, are you going to get frostbite? No. How was the concert? I haven't been yet. It's, I leave this weekend. It's this weekend. And I'm going with an IRL friend, so I'm very much looking forward to it. But if I have fun stories, I will do a short yapping stream after that as well, to let people know how it went. Your friends would be in many layers and still be cold, yeah. It's something about just being a young man, the testosterone. Certain people just are human furnaces. And there's nothing they can do about it. But now that I've gotten a bit older, I sometimes also have cold snaps where I will be completely frigid in the middle of summer. My body is just incorrect. Literally built incorrectly. Okay, what other stories can I tell? What other dumb shit have my coworkers gotten up to? Oh, yeah, classic young man. Can you believe this was a young man in his early 20s? We were traveling locally for 2 months. And in that time, he started routinely doing the dirty with someone without any birth control. And thankfully he didn't end up a father. But man, that was such an unneeded risk in many ways. You lost 80% of the cold immunity when you started HRT. Yeah, it's very much testosterone driven. For me, my body just decided to stop doing it sometimes. Now I get massive cold spurts. But generally I'm still a walking furnace. Like, I can tell I'm sick when I start feeling the cold, and I can tell I'm well again when, despite being sick, I have to sleep in just underwear, and even then that's just to keep things sanitary. And when I say just underwear, I mean no blanket. Like, I'll have maybe my blanket over my feet, and it's minus 10 degrees in my room, because I love the cold. Do you ever have a moment when you're about to fall asleep and then you remember a cringe moment? I used to cringe at myself and a lot of my past actions. And sometimes I still do, but generally speaking, I have almost no sense of shame. It was definitely helped by performing in musicals and a lot of other things about acting. Definitely helps. But for whatever reason, my body just flicked and I do not feel shame. If people ask me about my sexuality or anything like that, I'm very comfortable talking about it. A lot of people have seen me naked, as in triple digits, and let's just say I wasn't exactly having sex with them. It was just a thing that happened. And a lot of them were really, really shy. But I was like, nah, mate, it's a communal shower. We just have to do what we have to do. Get off your clothes, get out of the way. I don't care about seeing what's down your pants. I just want to get access to the warm water. But it's perfectly normal. What it is it's a weird psychological moment, which is just your body's trying to remind you not to do certain things because it feels social pressure not to. It's the same reason if you're ever really stressed about something, chances are you'll have a dream related to that. There was a short by Rin Penrose, the resident Brit VTuber everyone knows from her YouTube shorts, where she was talking about she kept having dreams about her accidentally leaking her social security number and bank information while she was streaming as a VTuber. And that's just your brain going, hey, this is something I know is bad that I don't want to do again. don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. It's just trying to brute force the behavior out of you, even if it doesn't necessarily make sense. So what that really is it's just a sign that you've grown as a person, and don't be too harsh on yourself. It's perfectly normal to cringe at yourself, and you're not past that stage in your life yet. If you think about how cringe you were 10 years ago, you'll be just as cringe now to yourself of 10 years. So don't worry about it. It's just a natural part of developing as a person. What's the for? Do you mean the fact that a lot of people have seen my crotch? Like, there's nothing special about it. Whoop-de-doo, you've seen me naked while I was relatively fit compared to what I am now. Though I am definitely getting back some of my fitness, which I'm looking forward to. I have only ever dated 2 people. So, like, of those hundreds of people who saw me naked, none of that was sexual, really. Completely separate story. A lot of people get iffy about it, but at the end of the day, it's just like, there's so much more important things to do than worry about your coworkers seeing you naked in a communal shower. You know what I mean? At least for me. But I'm not kidding. I basically have 0 sense of shame. What else is there? What other dumb shit have my coworkers done? Oh, yes, I remember. Another one. Self-acceptance stream, let's go. Yeah. It's more just like, I'm a very nihilistic person. For better most of the time, for worse some of the time. Generally speaking, it's worked out for me, though. I like to think of myself as a realist and a pessimist. Both. Sometimes a realist, often a pessimist. But no, like, I wanted to start with a couple of stories of stupid shit. Okay, wait. Before I move on to stupid shit other people have done, let me go another one that was me. Me being a dumbass, because, like, yeah, me not having regard for the cold, that's a bit whatever, I was fine. So one time, while I was working in the armored escort, someone dropped a box of ammo in a way that broke my foot. Now, naturally, the response you should take is going to the doctor. And instead, I just picked up the box of ammo because we needed to finish moving it. So I just, with a broken foot, moved it like 200 meters, sat that down, then sat outside, and then once I was feeling a bit better, drove myself to the hospital with a broken foot. And then got it treated. Because why would I call an ambulance? Or better yet, ask one of my coworkers to drive me? It's not like I was in a profession where we were explicitly all there to drive things, like in an armored escort convoy. It's not like we had a shortage of vehicles. Nothing matters, cue disco ball and jazz, yeah. I'm not a believer of nothing mattering. Nihility. It's more about there's a lot of things in life you can't change, and you shouldn't worry about them. The main thing is that you're doing something you want to do, something that makes you happy. And there will be a lot of things that'll go wrong or right that aren't really in your control, but just try to do your best and keep pushing yourself. Ambulances are expensive as hell, but I'm not American. Oh, actually, no. I'm glad I didn't call an ambulance, because turns out where I live, ambulances cost $500. So that would have been like the entire week's pay. But I could very easily have asked one of my coworkers to drive me. In fact, I'm pretty sure the person who dropped the box on my foot offered to drive me, and I was just pissed at them, so I was like, nah, she'll be right. But like, there are so many ways that could have gone wrong. Expect average of worse outcomes? Well, it's more just, sometimes things go bad, and it's not that I expect it, it's that I'm never really surprised by it. It's, for example, the expectation is that no one will ever offer me help in any way. So when people do offer to do things for me, I'm very happy, and I'll often take them up on that. But my expectation is that everyone's just sort of selfishly doing their own thing, and I'm fine with that. I don't mean that in a negative way. That's just how I always look at situations. You had a friend who fell off a tree and broke 5 vertebrae. He went to the hospital 2 days later and was in a bed for a year. Injuries are like that sometimes. I have a similar story, thankfully not as severe, where one of my coworkers was just bored one day and decided to free climb the side of the building we were in. Like, He fell from like 7 meters high. He did break his fall with a roll, but I had to physically drag him to the hospital because he kept being like, nah, I'm fine. Yeah, my back's a bit stiff, but like nothing's broken. And it's like, mate, you don't know that yet. That's why we need to take you to the hospital. It's not like it'll cost you anything. Except being embarrassed, but we're all already judging you for trying to free climb the side of a building and failing. It was dumb even if you'd been able to do it. It's way dumber because you weren't. You called an ambulance a few years ago and it was closer to 5,000. That's rough. Oh man. Healthcare is obviously nowhere near as bad in Australia as America. It's way, way better, but there's some BS. For example, I am now in a position where if I get private health insurance, I still get fully covered by the public one, but I get a tax discount that is more than the cost of private health insurance, which means essentially I now earn enough money that the government gives me a better standard of living and healthcare and pays me for it. It is disgusting. And like as part of that, I'll also get free glasses if I ever need them. A lot of free dental, free orthopedics, free therapy, free massages. So I'm literally being paid by the government to get better healthcare because I'm rich. What a fucking scam. It's so bad. Why does it exist this way? Your friend walked those 2 days and felt nothing? Yeah, there are... Sometimes your body just decides, no, we're fine, when you're really, really not. And then eventually you get treated and everything starts going wrong. The American healthcare moment, truly the land of the free. Australia, that's disgusting. Yeah, I'm simplifying it a little bit, but it's just like, I'm saving more on tax by having private health insurance than I would pay for private health insurance. So even putting aside all of the free benefits I get, like massively discounted medical and dental stuff, which by the way, dental is not free anywhere in Australia, unless you're like in the police force or the army. So even putting aside those savings, even assuming I never use them, I'm just getting a couple $100 off my tax for no reason other than I'm rich. And by the way, I'm wink wink nudge nudge rich, not actually rich. It's a pretty low bar to cross. It's just a case of they just, for whatever reason, decide, hey, screw anyone below this income threshold. Sucks to be you. All right, now that I've precursored with me also being a dumb shit, let's go over some of the stupid things my coworkers have done. So, starting off nice and easy. We were on a camping trip that involved carrying heavy things. Can't go into the job, because this is one of the ones where, again, it would dox me. There are a few I'll have to keep very, very vague like that. But basically, we had to move a lot of heavy things up a hill, and there was a path. A very shallow incline path that was a little bit long. Or there was a 55-degree slope covered in gravel. You can probably guess where this story is going. One of my coworkers decided to fling a 60-kilo box over his shoulder and sprint up the gravel because he thought it was just fun. And that's, like, unlike the guy who tried to free climb a building, he actually pulled it off, so he was kind of Chad. He was so quick, too, like... He must have been a power lifter or something. It was like 500 meters up that hill, and he made it in 2 minutes, carrying 60 kilos, I think a bit over 2 minutes, and it was a bit shy of 500 meters, but it was such a sharp incline that it was just so ridiculous. He made like 5 trips, while the rest of us sanely carried the equivalent of 20 kilos in each hand and went the long way. It was just like, no, check this out, fam. And unlike the other, he's not as much of a dumbass because he at least pulled it off. I'm rich like in taste? Oh, because you're seeing my thighs, you're asking how rich I taste. Do you want to drink my sweat, you pervert? Hentai. But no, like, I'm not rich. I'm in... I shouldn't say that stuff. I'm in a very fortunate financial position. by my standards because I don't spend much. I'm just barely over a threshold that means it is cheaper for me to get private health insurance than not. The threshold isn't that high. Gamer moment, yep, we rush the slope every time. Yeah, like, it wasn't even the only time he did it. Another time we were having us to essentially do like an obstacle course, it wasn't an obstacle course, it was similar to an obstacle course, just organically. Like, it was just organic terrain that happened to be really hard to navigate, to the point where before this camping trip, we'd done a few obstacle courses to practice. And everyone else was carrying like 5 kilos. Like, just water and a little bit of ammo. Like, no, I think this was money rather than ammo. Fake money, obviously. It was just like an extreme training thing they did. Look, there was a reason I stuck around despite the shit pay. And that was we did a lot of really fun, goofy things. But he took it at a sprint again. And he was just fine. And at one section, there was a 2-meter high, like, cliff. And he just fucking jumped it. Like, jumped up, kicked himself over. He was just showing off. And he pulled it off, too. He must have done parkour or something in his spare time and just decided, you know what, this is my moment where I can just make myself appear as Chad as possible. By your college, there was a retaining wall and a 60-degree slope. Basically, everyone charged instead of taking the 30-degree path. Yeah, but it wasn't even just that. Oh, by the way, this was after dark. We were using really cheap night vision goggles because our torches had run out of battery, and just a couple of us had, for a meme, brought night vision goggles, and everyone else just like one group of people had like 2 working torches that about half of the group was using, and the rest of us had really cheap off-the-shelf for fun night vision goggles because we were in a remote area and we wanted to stargaze and we didn't want to get lost. So it was already dumb to charge up a gravel 60-degree slope, but he did it at night while carrying 60 kilos at a sprint. It was the kind of glue sniffing that not many people survive. If I insist, oi, oi, I can and will stab you. And not in the wink wink nudge nudge way. I'm talking with a knife. Oh, I need to buy like a practice butterfly knife. Start learning a few knife tricks. I keep fidgeting at work, and one of my coworkers, it's gotten bad enough that one of my coworkers has offered me a few fidget toys, but they're not fun. They don't require enough dexterity, and I really need to work on my hand-eye coordination. So I need to get just like a rubber knife and practice with it. You aspire to be that man now. Unironically, he was so Chad. It's the same as the guy who got hit by a car and then beat half of us in the fitness test. It was just... They're doing such a badass thing just for shits and giggles that we all got so motivated. In theory, it should have taken us about 4 hours to do all of the carrying, and we finished in like 2.5 because after seeing this guy sprint up that slope, we were just like, no, okay, we can't all just pussy out and take it slowly. Let's just get this over with, fellas. He'd make a good US Marine, parentheses derogatory. He does seem like the type who would eat crayons. I think he'd fit right in. You have an infinity cube that you fidget with? I don't actually know what those are. I assume it's something similar to a Rubik's Cube, though. Okay, now let's see. What else did... There were a few other moments in that trip. I'm trying to think if any of them are funny enough to be worth telling. Oh, yes. Okay, so... This one's a bit more morbid. The person survived and are fine. They're fine. They're fine now. But we were doing, like, nighttime parachuting. I don't know why they offered this. And only 7 people accepted because we were essentially in a flat plains and it was a really dark night. I don't even know why they thought it was safe enough to take the plane. And let's just say that because it was so dark and there were so few landmarks to judge your depth by, someone did open their parachute a little bit late. Thankfully, they landed on their backpack and only fractured their spine, and they made a full recovery. But just, it was I have no idea how it got approved. I don't think it would get approved today if you tried. But yeah, from the kind of stories I'm telling about this job, You can probably see why there are specifics about this job I can't share with people. Like, it was fully legal, by the way. It was fully legal. This wasn't some criminal gang just taking us out back. He clearly has a couple levels in Paladin with empowerment auras. Yeah, for real. Oh, it's a cube that folds in a few ways. Oh, okay, maybe. I mean, if you can, ping me in the Discord about it. I'll look into it. But no worries if not. No worries if not. I just need to look into fidget toys in general. What else was there? What else was there? Oh, yes. So, around 2020, there was a major flood in Sydney, and we were prepping for a camping trip. And as a result of that prep, there were tents set up. And for whatever reason, they had double booked the rooms we were sleeping in. So we got kicked out of our rooms and got told to stay in camps during a flood. In group tents in sets of 12. It was bloody miserable. And the most insulting part was that I was on loan for a different part of the company, and the double booking was that other part of the company. So I was kicked out of my own room because it was reserved to me. I wanted to fucking punch something. Like, oh wow, this name looks familiar. I wonder where this dickhead is. Why are you kicking me out of the room? The company had just forgotten I was on loan, booked me a room, and it happened to be the room I was already staying in, so I literally got kicked out and I wasn't allowed to sleep there, and I had to take a fucking tent during a whole bunch of flash flooding for a few weeks. Oh, you're listening to my stories and suffering through IS4. I imagine the IS4 sounds a lot less bad. But yeah, I've been around the block a few times. Let's think, what else is there? What else is Oh yes, this is a secondhand story. This one I didn't witness, thankfully, because I would have had a fucking panic attack. One of my co-workers, I will have to be vague about this. They worked in a bomb squad. So they dealt with explosives fairly often. Like, a bomb squad is just a good summary of what they did. Again, this was legal. I just want to clarify, this was not some criminal enterprise. But the reason it's relevant was while they were riding in the back of a ute, which, you know, incredibly professional already, they didn't have room because they were carrying a lot of explosives. One of his dickhead co-workers, with a live armed packet of C4, was fiddling with the trigger mechanism like it was a set of jingly keys while they were on the move in a cross-country terrain, getting jostled in the back of a ute. And he was the... I didn't see that, but I saw him like an hour later, and he was the most pissed I've ever seen him. I'm pretty sure if he had picked a fight with the stationary ute at that stage, his fists would have won out. That's how angry he was. And I did, like, 2 days later, after they finished punishing the guy, see the other guy, but I didn't get a chance to chat with him. But let's just say, like, days later, he was still pretty miserable. And I can't even, like, blame them for punishing him. He was playing with a live bomb while being rocked around on the back of an open ute in rocky terrain. And if his finger had slipped, all 5 of the people there would have just disappeared, because they had an armed pile of C4 and were escorting other explosives. It wasn't actually C4. It was more along the line of fireworks. It's just simpler to say C4. My worst enemy, parentheses, me. Yeah, that guy, like, for real, he was his own rival. Thankfully, the intrusive thoughts did not win. Your ears are getting destroyed by Whisper Rain. Yeah, Whisper Rain is insanely loud. Meet the demo man. My guy thought he was the demo man, for real, for real. Put like it is, parentheses, explosives. Yeah, look, it's, I can't go into specifics on that job either. It wasn't literally explosives, but there were things that, if he had pressed a certain button he was holding, would have functioned identically to explosives because of the amount of them. So that's just... I thought about some of these stories ahead of time just to make sure I can tell them in a way that makes sense without immediately doxing myself. Because some of these, as I'm sure you can understand, are niche enough that if you knew the specifics, you would just like Google it, and there'd be a total of like 10 people who'd ever done that. Okay, what else was there? What else was there? Oh, this is more of a. This one's funny. This is a back in school story. Um, when I was never exactly a model student. I might have mentioned it a few times before. I'm an incredibly fast worker when it comes to mental tasks. I'm not an incredibly good worker, I'm an incredibly fast worker. So, for example, when I sat my equivalent of the SATs for all you Americans out there, basically the college or year 12 final exams, we got given 6 hours for one test and I finished it in 17 minutes. And then they wouldn't let me leave, so I just drew in a notepad while hating life. Because why would I go back and edit my work? But yeah, I got like an 85%, so good enough score. Very, very much good enough. So the reason I preface this is, as I'm sure you can understand, I didn't exactly like sitting around in the classroom being bored out of my skull. Yeah, I probably did tell that story. The reason I brought it up is just context for this one, which is out of my desire to avoid school as much as possible, I got just good enough at a few different sports and chess that I could join the school teams and be excused from classes. And I actually won, like, some medals. I got just good enough to be competitively viable enough to get to nationals for both, so that I could skip a few classes. Because, hey, if I'm going to nationals, I miss a few days of school. So it was entirely motivated by spite. I'm not very good at chess, I'm not very good at swimming. I was just so damn dedicated to saving myself from the boredom that I got just barely good enough to not have to do it for a little bit. I think that's the only so yeah, the having medals for skipping school, trophies. I think that's the only interesting school story I have. I do have a few others, but they would require a lot of thought on how to tell them without doxing myself. I've already got. No, I did already mention the guy who snorted a whole bunch of pre-workout, didn't I? That's one of my favorite coworker stories ever. Oh, right. I did I worked at a gun range for a little bit. There are a few stories of idiots there, which I'm sure you can relate. People get stressed out when they're handling a gun. So my two favorites. No matter how stupid you think rules are, no matter how stupid all of the certain security checks you have to take are, let me tell you on the other side why we have those rules. So while I was working there, over a 2-month period, I was working there for 2 months. Over a 3-day period, 2 different people accidentally smuggled out live ammunition and a firearm. So theoretically, they could have very easily committed murder. Guns are hard to get in Australia. Except if you're these two, who on days I wasn't there, managed to just fucking accidentally smuggle shit. And then there was another guy who was his first time using a rifle. It was a semi-auto. This was a relatively high-end gun range. And this was a class 4, more experienced shooters. I don't know why this guy was there. It was his first time with a gun. It got jammed, as they tend to. And he couldn't unjam it. And he just like had a stroke or something and started turning to the instructor. And they'd just gone over like, hey, you should point your gun where your eyes are looking so that you don't point it at anyone. And he got the first part, but not the second. So as he was turning to look at the instructor, he was turning the barrel of his gun at the instructor. And it went off halfway. If it had been about half a second later, it would have went off into the instructor's foot. So that guy got a very calm, relaxing dressing down that definitely didn't blow out my ears almost as much as the one dickhead who liked to use an old school blunderbuss at a shooting range because haha, it make funny bang noise. You cheersed your school and mandatory conscription with geological expertise. Hey, you'd be the perfect goal for Osgeo. You like anime and you have geological expertise. Maybe you're why they're at all of the anime conventions. Can't sit in classes when you're in other half of the country digging up dinos. Yeah, that was just anything I could get good enough at to not have to attend. Accidentally? Yes, accidentally. And I can verify because I saw one of them after, it was actually an accident. He somehow got like 3 bullets caught in his hat. Because they were using hats to pick up the ejected brass to clear the range. And somehow he just like dumbass dropped half his mag into his hat and didn't notice. Reminds you of going through an airport like, what if I accidentally brought a knife, but also how? Yeah. The second guy got a bullet caught in his sock. He was one of those weirdos who like has really thick woolen socks and then folds it over his shoe, and he was adjusting his shoe and somehow got a bullet caught in there, and he didn't notice because it was between the 2 layers of his sock, like against his boot. Tarkus is a stable human being and can be trusted with firearms. I can be trusted with firearms. I only accidentally killed people while my gun was unloaded. Also known as lasing, which is the idea of always treat a gun like it's loaded, and if you point it at someone and you're not intending to killing them, you're lasing them and you're a dumbass. But I'm quite safe with guns. And by the way, for anyone who's never held a gun, they're actually surprisingly heavy. How did that firearm get into my pocket? No, okay, the firearms, they were just really confused. They didn't realize the checkout point, and somehow the fuckwit security guard just, like, was like, oh yeah, they're just carrying a rifle into the car park out of the establishment. It'll be fine. And thankfully it was, because they realized, hey, I probably shouldn't drive off with this firearm I rented. Hey, where should I return this? To the poor receptionist who just had, like, a stroke because someone just walked up with a fucking rifle. Was like, hey, do you want this? It's like, am I being robbed? We just chilling? Yes, sir. I'm just going through some of the work stories of my dumbass coworkers. Did he not wear the hat? No, he was wearing the hat. I have no idea. Like, he put the hat back on after he dumped the brass, but because the live ammunition was so much heavier and larger, it got caught on the inside of his hat and he didn't notice when he pressed it against his hat. I don't know why. Like, I don't know how. But he was so mortified when we discovered it that you can very much tell it was not intentional. So if you ever wonder why you have to empty every single pocket and get a thorough pat down when you're doing really dumb shit to the point where you're like, hey, can you trust me to tie my own shoes? And you get told, no, we can't. People like that are the reason. It's a hunk of metal. A lot of people seem to think they're plastic. Some are. Some are actually fairly rigid plastic. I don't know, anime teach me not to trust anime girls with guns. Hey, what do you mean? In anime, we're always hyper accurate, or we jiggle our boobs around the bullet, like that one High School of the Dead clip. That was so stupid. But yeah, a semi-automatic rifle will weigh about 4 kilos unloaded, about 5 kilos loaded. A rocket launcher will weigh about, what is it, 15 kilos loaded, I think? It's either 10 kilos unloaded, 15 kilos loaded, or 15 unloaded, 20 kilos loaded. The actual rockets you fire out of a proper shoulder rocket launcher are multiple kilos each, so generally you only carry a few shells, even on really short range. Like, it was a high-end range. We didn't have many people who busted out a rocket launcher, but we had a few, and I got to hold it. I also got to hold, like, a shotgun and a sniper rifle. Never a pistol, weirdly enough. Apparently, like, oh, wait. No, that's right. They gave me a walkthrough on how to disassemble a pistol. I got to hold it then. So that was fun. But yeah, rocket launchers especially, very heavy, unless you're talking the really dinky ones. Never got to fire one, but I have gotten to hold one. It was good fun. And generally, any rifle you use will be a couple kilos, and you really feel the weight, especially if you're carrying it for a while. But that wasn't really relevant unless you were working with the armory, which I only did a few times. I was generally just helping out with other parts. Me with my emotional support M4A1. Yeah, any Americans can relate. They have an emotional support M4A1. Now, onto slightly different work stories that unfortunately aren't quite as epic. I mentioned I was unfortunately a team leader briefly. I don't like leading people. So how this happened was right after I joined a team in a tech role, which is to say, incredibly specialized knowledge role, the team leader quit and they decided, hey, you know who would be a great interim team leader for the next 4 months? Someone who doesn't know any of the 7 applications we're working on or any of the 30 team members. Congratulations on your promotion. No, you're not getting paid extra. And it got to the point where some of my tickets were just, hey, this person who I only know the name of and have never spoken to was chatting with this other person I only know the name of who never spoke to, who was the head architect. And for whatever reason, they just, like, they were talking about something really important and hadn't decided on what to do. So I was responsible for chasing the 2 of them up and ensuring they continued to talk to each other. Thankfully, I did manage to shed those expectations after a few months. But I was decent at my job, and they were like, hey, do you want to make this permanent? And I said, fuck no. This is not the job you hired me to do. Don't insult me or my son, parentheses AK-12 again. Specifically a 15, but you get the idea. Yeah, guns are fun. You lead us to victory in Arknights? Look, I have been trained as a team leader. I just don't enjoy it. And yeah, other fun gun facts though, like a lot of people have probably heard the term pipe gun. What you don't know is the reason it's called that is it has like 4 moving parts total. And is made, no, it has 4 parts total. It has like 2 moving parts. What a pipe bomb is, pipe gun, is essentially a gun made out of a pipe, literally just random bits of scrap metal. They're incredibly simple. Also a Sten gun. It's, hey, what is the cheapest we can make a gun? So that's where it gets the name from. Unlike a machine gun, which if you ever say machine gun, technically you're using it wrong. Sorry, minigun, rather, I think it is. Because a minigun and a machine gun... Yeah, minigun. Minigun refers to a very specific model of machine gun. Also, another fun gun fact a lot of people don't know. Any ridiculously good automatic weapon you can carry is a light support weapon. So if you have a machine gun that can fire thousands of armor-piercing rounds a minute, and you can carry it, it is a light support weapon. The distinction is, do we need a tank or armored vehicle to move this gun? If not, it is a light support weapon. So even though some of them are like 60 kilos, because one dumbass decided, hey, I bet I can hip fire this while he was a little bit too drunk and should not have been around something that can spit that many bullets per second, for whatever reason the bosses allowed him on the range anyway. Okay, what else was there? What other story? There's so many minor dumbass moments, but they require so much context that by the time I got to the end of the story, it wouldn't be funny anymore. Oh yeah, the Owen gun. The best submachine gun of World War II was made in a shed by an Australian kid named Owen, hence the name the Owen submachine gun. Yep. Not really a work story, but something people get a lot of wrong. Get wrong a lot. Damn words. Whenever people say, oh, the AK-47 has really high tolerances, that means you can fire it when it's dirty. No, that's wrong. That's outright wrong. If the AK-47 is even slightly dirty, it'll stop firing. It is ridiculously bad at operating while dirty. The reason the AK-47 is such a well-known gun and really good is it's really easy to maintain and clean. Like, ridiculously so. Once you start getting to full-on automatic, the moving parts get so dirty so fast and are so dangerous. A lot of guns, if you have a stoppage, and you go to clear effectively the barrel, and it's actually quite fun. Some of the, fun, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. If you get it wrong, you lose your hand or your face or your eye. So it's this fun little mini game where you go, oh, my gun has a stoppage. Let me open it. Oh, there's still a bullet there. And you have about 3 seconds to slam it shut. Otherwise, the bullet goes off in your face rather than down the barrel. But you need to check, because otherwise the gun won't fire. Hey, hello, Amira. Yep, just yapping. That's because it has like 6 main parts. Yeah, the AK-47 is a very simple gun in a good way. And another really common misconception, especially from movies, is the accuracy of pistols. So I'm sure we've all seen some kind of spy movie or cop movie where cops will take aim at someone like 100 meters away and just dead on bang them. Bang, 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 bang. They go down. Even putting aside that they almost always shoot more bullets than those guns can physically carry, that's not how pistols work. There is no point where you'd be skilled enough to snipe someone from 100 meters with a standard pistol. Most pistols, like, there are some exceptions. There are some pistols, especially like the Desert Eagle, where it's just such a ridiculous caliber that it's a little bit more accurate. But because of how short the barrel is, because of how the barreling works, for anyone who doesn't know, the barreling is it's a ridge of spiral metal on the inside of a barrel. And effectively, it forces the bullet when it's fired to spin really, really quickly as it goes down the barrel before it comes out, so that there's a minimal amount of drift on the bullet while it's shooting. Generally speaking, a good rifle, part of the reason you, sorry, tangent into tangent. The reason you generally are advised to aim for the chest when you're shooting, or the center of the target, is because if you put your fist over your chest, at about 100 meters, a rifle will hit any part of that fist. So any part of that diameter. It could be dead center, exactly where you're aiming. It could be the absolute fringes. And then once you're at 200 meters, it's double that in each side. So it would be two fists next to each other, but make it a circle. 300 meters, you generally would be missing the torso, depending on the make. So a pistol is accurate, which is to say will hit within a few inches all of the time of where you're actually aiming when you pull the trigger, assuming you don't jerk it, from about 30 meters, tops. That's a good pistol. A lot of pistols are only accurate to 10 meters. Especially dinky police pistols. So whenever you see a member of the police pull out their handgun and then shoot through a car, no. They don't actually have much stopping power or accuracy. Likewise, any moment where they someone's got a hostage in front of them and they shoot the person holding the hostage while they're holding the hostage, the reason that doesn't happen in real life is because the variance in gunshots means you have about a 50% chance of the bullet going directly into the hostage. Assuming you're at any kind of reasonable distance, which you would be, because if you were close enough to be accurate with a pistol, chances are they would have killed the hostage by that point. True and real, it sucks when you need a clean in the midst of field trials. Oh yeah, it can take upwards of an hour for a group of people to clean a machine gun. They get so dirty. And then you also have some fuckwit who cleans the scope with the rag that's rated for the machine gun, and then it's too fine grit, and they just completely ruin the $30,000 scope. I'm using metric and imperial systems in one sentence. Look, when you're talking about guns, that generally just kind of happens. The Americans kind of won when it came to guns. And, for example, any caliber, the whole idea of caliber, it's so stupid. There are so many different terminologies when it comes to guns that just mix and match the metric and imperial system that it's impossible to keep them separated. One thing I will say, though, if you hear a 7.62, 7.62, what that means is that is the length in millimeters of the bullet from tip to end, if I remember right. I could be wrong, but I believe it's from tip to end. That's why you got to optimize by using an M82 Barrett. No, don't use really old guns. But yeah, basically the reason I bring this up, anytime you see someone really far away with a pistol, they're not hitting shit. And there are actually fun stories. There are types of machine guns which we had to make less accurate. Or not we. I wasn't the person designing them. But their stories are when they were being designed, they were too accurate and had to be made less accurate. The reason for that is the point of a machine gun is to just designate a certain area where there's maybe a choke point, maybe it's someone has to come through a door, maybe there's barbed wire. And it's for example, a 7-meter circle, and you just want anything that walks through that to die. You want bullets to just hit there. But if your gun is shooting really, really accurately to the point where you're 500 meters away and all of the bullets are landing within 6 inches of each other, then you can't provide suppressing fire because you need to be manually aiming the shots, and that's not the purpose of a machine gun. A machine gun is kind of just screw anything in this general direction. You've gotten shot at during New Year's, it's not fun. Yeah, getting shot at is not fun. Whenever I've joked about I'm better at dodging bullets IRL, I'm talking about the gun range. We've had quite a few near misses. I don't work there anymore, but I do think fondly of my times. So, nope, cannot tell that story, cannot. Damn it. That's such a fun story, but no, okay, I can't. Don't ever fire a blunderbuss, just in general. I can give that piece of advice. And always, always brace the rifle against your shoulder. And I don't mean the tip of your shoulder, I don't mean you're dead on your shoulder, I mean the little gap right between your shoulder and your chest where there's a very firm set of muscle, so that when you inevitably get bruised by the recoil, you don't drop the gun or have it fly off your shoulder or smack yourself in the face. I've seen many, many people do that incorrectly. Likewise, never fully extend your arm when you're holding a pistol. Never hold a pistol sideways. All of these things, there's a reason they get memed on by anyone who's actually ever fired a gun, and that's because once you fired a gun once, you will understand why it's a bad idea. Can confirm that from the shotguns and rifles you've used, yeah, for real, especially using a shotgun. Sometimes they do, you never know. You once got shot by an archaic shotgun thing from like 40 meters right in the buttocks too. That was probably using like snake pellet or something. If it was using actual, like an 8 gauge, you'd be dead. Ooh, that's something I should cover. Not a lot of people know what gauges mean. So with a shotgun, the lower the gauge, the more deadly it is. So there are only like 2 guns in existence that are a 4 gauge, because that is so ridiculously explosively powerful that it's kind of unsafe to use. I think there's a couple that are a 2 gauge, but they've never been used practically. So 12 gauge is actually kind of a low power shotgun, but it's still a shotgun. A lot of people jokingly call it a master key, because if you have a shotgun, you can open any lock. And basically, a shotgun is just a spray of pellets with gunpowder behind it, so that when it goes at the barrel, it just sprays everything in a general direction. So if you get lucky, it can miss you entirely and make an outline around you, but generally speaking, it won't. Gauge is how many bullets fit upright in this cup. Yep. So if it's a 2 gauge, that means only 2 bullets fit there. It's an elephant gun at that stage. Which, yes, they're named because they were... most guns can... Oh, yeah, fun fact. Most guns will not be able to kill a bear because bear pelts are bulletproof. So the reason things like elephant guns exist are because elephants' hides are so thick that traditional firearms would not penetrate, and they needed a dedicated, extra strength, armor-piercing round just to be able to kill them. So a special gun to go hunting an elephant. You and your few relatives were hanging out during New Year's, and one of your uncles was drunk and shot at us. I'm glad everyone is okay, but that is very America build. Getting drunk, thinking your nephews are trespassing, and opening fire. Yeah, a 1 gauge shotgun is a fucking ballista. Very much so. But no, guns are really, really weird. People simultaneously overestimate them and underestimate them. For example, the whole concept of accuracy. I've looked down a 50 times scope on a sniper rifle. You can see ridiculously far, but it is really, really low quality. So everything's like blurry, which makes sense because it's a very small scope looking really, really far. Let me tell you, if you twitch holding a sniper rifle, you're hitting like 50 meters to the left, assuming the shot is perfectly accurate. And I've never fired a sniper rifle, but with high-end sniper rifles, another thing a lot of people understand is the force behind them. They think like a near miss with a sniper rifle, the other guy's like a little flustered but fine, he almost got shot, he's fine. No, high caliber sniper rifles, you use them when you want to kill everyone in the room, because just the force of the bullet passing can do a lot of damage. Same way, if someone is lifted by the force of an explosion and then they walk it off in a movie, that always pisses me off because I've heard enough about explosives from my coworker who worked with explosives a whole bunch. Because, look, he worked with explosives, wink wink, and actual explosives in a previous job. He was an expert who was brought on to the company. If you're getting physically lifted by a detonation, you are so injured. You're not walking that off. You have broken bones. Like, if you're lucky, you will survive relatively uninjured, no permanent damage, but you're not unharmed. If you're close enough, if the force is strong enough that you are physically lifted by the force, that means you are very, very disoriented in the best case scenario. Kinetic explosive is one of your favorite phrases. Yeah. Kinetic explosives. It's an important distinction because a lot of the time you'd use shrapnel or incendiary. Incendiary is pretty rare for especially hand grenades and explosives, but you can use it for explosives. Movies completely ignore shrapnel. To be fair, not all grenades have shrapnel. Like, technically, yes, they all have shrapnel because parts of the grenade shell fly off when it is blown up. But you do kind of have to get unlucky to get hit by the shrapnel. It's more likely that, like, rocks on the ground will get kicked up and thrown your way. Hit it so hard it blows up. Oh, no, these days, most explosives are dealt with special types of electrocurrents, so only certain detonators can make them go off, and even other explosives won't make them detonate, as a safety precaution. That's not always the case, as one of my coworkers would very emphatically tell you, but it's usually the case. So without the detonator, they're effectively a kilogram of brick, unless you have the specific keyed detonator with the right frequency, or can hacksaw the frequency personally. The natural end result of Rod from God is good, but at a small scale it's a very cool concept. Yeah, just dropping something hard enough it craters and makes an explosion. If you've ever seen videos of people shooting tannerite inside of microwaves or refrigerators, tannerite might go off, but even then, I would expect it not to. It does depend on the composition. I don't know too much about tannerite specifically. I thought it was relatively unstable, but I could be completely wrong on that. But what I mean is, like, it's not like the dynamite days where dynamite can kind of just be blown up by heat. That's why they have wires and buttons. And never ever wrap quick fire wire around your own arm as a joke. It's not funny, it will burn you. Thankfully, I never saw anyone do that, but I have heard stories from well before I worked there about some dumbasses. But yeah, the main story of that is you would be surprised by the recoil of a gun, the inaccuracy of a gun, and also the accuracy of a gun. Both are true at once. Also, the concept of zeroing. If you take a gun to a new location, you need to actively zero it, otherwise your scope is useless. Unless you're aiming down the sights, which the iron sights, which is literally attached to the gun. And even then, it's kind of iffy. Because the scope, even an iron sight, is at a different angle from the barrel of the gun, you have to, like, very carefully adjust it. That's why the markings on the scope are actually to let you know where the center is from X hundred meters. So whenever you see, like, whenever you think a traditional sniper scope with the jagged lines down the middle and down the side, the reason for that is that's to tell you 100 meter drop, 200 meter drop, 300 meter drop, so on and so forth. So if you eyeball someone and go, oh, they're 300 meters away, you'd aim at the third line instead of the dot in the middle, because bullets drop really quickly and can take a while. There are multiple battleship fights in World War II where they would see the shell coming and just kind of not be able to do anything because it would take multiple seconds to hit the battleship. You miss nitroglycerin explosives blowing you up for looking at them funny. Look, there's a reason. There's a special corporal equivalent rank in, I believe, the UK and Australia. I don't know if it's in the US, called brigadier. If you know, you know. So a brigadier is just a corporal from the artillery corps, and the reason it came about was back in the medieval era. Cannons existed, but they weren't exactly reliable. So you needed an officer because you couldn't trust dumb, illiterate peasants with explosives. That like guarantees they go off. But anyone senior didn't want to be the one lighting the cannon because it was like a 50-50. Would it blow up the group of enemies in front of you, or would it blow up you? So it would go to the least senior officer, who is a corporal equivalent. Corporal is the lowest rank where you are technically an officer. A non-commissioned officer, but an officer. So they got a special term for their corps in honor of all of the people who got used as sacrificial fodder of, hey, light this 50-50. Take this coin flip with your life because you're more junior than me and I don't want to do it. So that's why there's still a distinction. There are still distinctions with privates as well, but I don't understand why those exist. But yeah, a lot of people don't realize why bullets drop and miss so much. Bullets are spinning incredibly quickly, and even the tiniest jump, it's actually really hard to shoot a bullet accurately. Generally, the sort of standard is you're aiming for within about 100 millimeters from where you are aiming, like for your general grouping. From a distance of about 200 meters, it's been a little while. No, I think it's 300. That's the sort of general accuracy you're going, and it changes depending on which rifle you're using, depending on how accurate they are, because every rifle is different. If you're using a shorter rifle that's metal, that's obviously a different story than a longer reinforced plastic one. But you cannot expect to hit dead accurate. You'll never ding someone directly in the forehead. And shooting close range is actually really hard. That's why pistol ranges are so much harder to get into than just standard rifle ranges, though it's less important in America because Americans have access to guns. But for most Australians, you could access a rifle, a non-semi-automatic rifle. Anything more than that, it's a bit more restricted. 40k Orcast technology. Yeah. So many people have such a warped perspective on the concept of history. It's actually really, really funny, fun rather, to learn about. For example, Joan of Arc, her favorite weapon was a cannon. A lot of people don't realize that cannons were indeed around in the medieval ages. They were very, very prominent. They were the main form of siege weapons. They're not directly comparable to what you think of when you think a cannon. They were a bit more basic, but they were definitely around. It wasn't all battering rams. Sieges as a whole, medieval battles as a whole, most people just think swords and shields, which is more of the ancient times of Rome and Greece. But even then, the general Roman formation was, we have a really big shield wall and all of our soldiers carry a really mini javelin. And if we can't stab you and bait you into stabbing range, we're going to all collectively yeet our javelins at you and then swap to short swords. So even in the Roman days, it wasn't really about just swords and shield. They were absolutely cheesing you with javelins. Gunpowder's pretty old. It took a while to get precise with it. Same with steam engines. Oh, yeah, that's another fun one. Theoretically, the Roman Empire had everything it needed to have the Industrial Revolution happen. It just wasn't viable. The reason it came from England, centuries later, was steam engines are really, really good once they're up and running, but they're incredibly expensive to get running. And the reason England did it when no one else had in the past, because everyone was focused on short-term profit, was because England was running out of trees. So they're like, well, shit. If we don't invest in these steam engines, we won't be able to produce power anymore. We're almost out of forests, fellas. What can we do? Precision metal machining was huge for engineering. Yeah, it was so huge. Even things like bronze. It's insane to think about how massive of a difference bronze is from copper. It's the same nowadays with nuclear energy. Yeah, nuclear energy, there's a lot of fear-mongering about it because there have been a few disasters. And, well, let's just say Australia has a weird, let's just say there were parts of the desert that were occupied that we decided weren't occupied and tested nukes in. But nuclear energy is a really, really good option. From what I've read about it, I'm by no means an expert. It's just most of the things against it I've seen are just kind of general fear-mongering. that is literal propaganda for coal and oil companies who don't want to be driven out of business. That's another thing I've noticed. Most people are not anywhere near skeptical enough when they hear things. You need to think, okay, is this propaganda for X, Y, or Z? That's not an insult. I used to be like that as well. But it's a very, very common tactic. I want to do an entire video talking about propaganda. Propaganda is so fun. I need to research it more, refresh myself. But look, you are not immune to propaganda. I'm not immune to propaganda either. I'm resistant to some of the more common types of propaganda because I'm aware of it. It's literally like a cognito hazard, where once you become aware of certain propaganda techniques, you gain an innate resistance, but your entire worldview changes. It's pretty much totally safe at this point. Yeah, that's why it's so wild that, like, Germany is closing its nuclear power plants. The art of lying at a scale. It's not even just that. I mean, it's, for example, I mean this in a non-controversial way. This is just the least controversial one I can think of. Generally speaking, anyone westernized, I'm sure when you grew up, you heard either communism is the enemy or Russia is the enemy, or at least like the general sentiment. And you probably believed it for a little bit. And when you think of Russia or communism, you'll think of certain things. That's propaganda. That doesn't necessarily mean it's untrue. That would require a lot of research into the specifics you're being told and the reality of the situation. But the reason that came about was a massive push of anti-communism because the desire to go to war was waning, and the US like started doing that to convince everyone to go to war during World War II. And then it just kind of stuck because it was successful. But the reason you grew up hearing that is it's a result of propaganda, so now everyone kind of generally shares these opinions. Even if they're very light, they're nowhere near as strong as they used to be, but it came from that. What if you'd like to believe in those big and wealthy politicians' words who have our best interests in mind, for sure? It's fallen away, but still somewhat present depending on what's being talked about. Yeah. Just like the entire concept of it being present, the entire concept of it being in your mind, is a result of the propaganda. That's what I mean when I say people aren't nearly as immune to propaganda as they think they are. Like, if you ask anyone, here's actually a really good example. What do you think is causing inflation? I won't get controversial with it. I won't think you're stupid, whatever your answer is. But please do, like, whatever you think, just one of the major causes of inflation, chuck it in the chat. I won't judge, and no worries if you don't want to participate. But any answer you give, almost any answer you give, will be the direct result of propaganda. Most of them. Most of the really, really common ones that people think of. And I've researched some of that. I find propaganda really, really interesting. I don't mean, oh, I'm such a big brain, it doesn't work on me. No, it's just one of those things where once you're aware of it, it's very, very blatant. It's not exactly masterclass propaganda or anything, because it doesn't need to be. The goal isn't to convince everyone, it's just to convince people who don't know about a subject so that they're generally on your side. That's the main goal. I'm sure our leaders are doing their best to take care of us. Parentheses, they haven't built a house in 6 fucking years. Yo, are you also Australian, or are you somewhere else with the same problems as us? Oh, sorry, the Australian housing market is, it's in a great situation. Very, very wonderful. Let me move up so you can see more of my thighs. That way you'll believe me even more, right? That makes me more accurate. If you recall, inflation tracks to goods basked, so it's caused by prices rising, but you might be off your ass. Generally, the only actual source of inflation is the government. The government printing money. They do this thing sometimes called quantitative easing, and what that is the government prints money and then buys their own debt with that money, which is just printing money, but they add an extra step so that they can pretend they're not. And then somehow they gaslit people into thinking that's not the cause of inflation, when it is literally just increasing the amount of money without changing the amount of goods. And like there's more nuance to it. That's just a very, very general summary. That is the actual source of inflation. Price rising is different. Like oftentimes businesses will raise prices because they can or to make more money, but the overall economic source of inflation is generally the government. To a degree, also the US government, because the US dollar is, up until recently, the absolute of the world. It was recently broken. The reason it was the absolute is the US dollar was the only currency you could trade petrol in. So oil, all of that jazz. And that was... This is a conspiracy theory. This is not proven. But the last time someone tried to breach the petrodollar and trade oil in a non-US dollar currency was Afghanistan. And then there was this weird thing that happened like relatively shortly after called the Afghanistan War. So yes, that is just a conspiracy. That's not proven. That's just a funny, goofy way to say it. But it has recently been breached by Saudi Arabia. You're in Europe, bro. We have no fucking houses. I mean, hey, you have those $1 homes in Italy that need hundreds of thousands of euros of repair because they're fucking destroyed in tiny towns that used to be flooded. Might be that in Western countries, but here on the Russian half of the population very much don't like communism for very concrete reasons. Yeah. All of these, I'm not trying to get political or anything like that. I'm just giving a very general summary. Obviously, depending on where you live, you'll have different beliefs, but any sort of inherent belief you grew up with, even if it might be right or wrong, whichever the case, chances are it's because of just generalized propaganda. Like, a lot of stuff comes from just general propaganda, which is just, hey, it would be convenient for us if people just kind of generally thought this way and didn't think much about it. So if you can't give a reason for why you think something the way it is, chances are it's you've been caught. They gotcha. Big government gotcha. But no, I don't mean that in the conspiracy theorist way of, oh, there's the Illuminati. No. It just makes sense. They want to convince you of some things. Goods basket. And yeah, you're right. At least in the US, it's a measure of price of a certain set of goods. What's really interesting about that, basically the only thing that hasn't changed is the comparative value of the US dollar compared to oil. So that is the ultimate anti-inflation peg. So we're basically on an oil standard instead of a gold standard. The gold standard was much harder, but it's like even things like the Australian housing crisis. Wages don't keep up to this, but a house is worth roughly the same amount of barrels of oil as it was 50 years ago. So barrels of oil are the ultimate hedge. You should buy them and store them in your yard. That's an amazing idea. Black gold and whatnot, yeah, for real. Back to... I want to nerd more about history, but this isn't a history stream. I already did that with Caesar, where I spent like half an hour reading about Julius Caesar and an hour and a half nerding about history. I also want to talk a lot about horror and how that works. There's a lot of things I just need to force myself to re-research so I actually get them accurately, because I'm passionate about these things and I want to share them with people and I think they'll find them interesting. But no, the modern day concept of technology is very, very weird. Like, our sports stadiums are functionally identical to the Roman Colosseums. Ancient Rome had cranes that could build multi-story buildings, things like that. We only recently, like within the last 10, 20 years, built a dome, like the type of roof, the domed roof, that was larger than one that was built in like 200 BC, I think it was. You need to sleep. No worries, Shadow. Thanks for coming by. Hi, Ancient. Welcome. And yeah, sorry, Shadow. Tomorrow's stream is the same time as this one. I forgot I had a public holiday because Anzac Day, which is Australian New Zealand Army Corps, for anyone who doesn't know, basically just a celebratory day of our veterans. So I could theoretically move it, but I probably won't because I already announced it, and that would make me look foolish. But I will try to stream it some other times. We only just figured out Roman self-repairing concrete, right? Yes, it wasn't self-repairing, but it's just better concrete. And that was because in the instructions to make it, they just said use water. And then when we tried, we used like pure water. But no, they meant water from a certain sea. And that contains certain minerals and what have you. And salt. And that mixed together to make much, much stronger concrete. And it's like, well, why would they specify what type of water? That was just the water they used. Where else were you going to get water? Are you a dumbass? But then us modern folks were like, no, 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 we need to use pure water. Surely the Romans mean that. That type of concrete is expensive? Yes. But it also builds incredibly sturdy things. There are plenty of old bridges that have been flooded multiple times and been absolutely fine versus new bridges that'll be completely demolished by flooding and have to be rebuilt every couple of years. Something to do with the type of lime? Yeah, it was like limestone and minerals in the water. Oh, another thing that a lot of people don't realize is people think it's like a really modern thing that like they think it's like 1800s at the earliest that we change the scenery, build massive quarries, destroy mountains in the pursuit of minerals. Well, actually, during the ancient period of Rome, the Roman Empire, they leveled multiple mountains, completely gone, no trace of them, because there was gold inside. So hey, even back in the day they were doing terraforming for the sake of profit. Some of the Roman architecture is really, really fascinating. I just wouldn't do a good job explaining it. But even things like the famous aqueducts, they would drop something like exactly 3 inches every mile. The level of precision they built those things with to perfectly give it just the right amount of pressure and flow was actually ridiculous. We've quarried forever, ancient times everyone had slaves. Yeah, work is real cheap with slavery. But it wasn't just quarries, they also outright leveled mountains. Don't think it was just big holes in the ground. We've been doing it that way forever. Egyptians did it too if we believe in the Greek historic records. That wouldn't surprise me. So as much as the Egyptians were kind of, I mean, they used lead makeup with obvious results. But they weren't dumb, they just didn't know some things we know that now are obvious. It's the same way smoking causes cancer. There used to be a big push that wasn't the case. People underestimate how much you can do when you've command over a couple thousand dudes. Yeah, for real. You can un-island an island. Oh, yeah. Friendly reminder of the day that Rome actually bridged to England. Because the reason England has been like unassailable and in charge for centuries and centuries is they had the world's best navy, and they were a tiny island no one could reach unless they fought their navy. If there was like a tiny gap of land between France and England that you could walk on, in the entire history of the world would have been so different. Because if you read through any invasion of England, 90% of them are just, oh, but the British won because they had the world's best navy and no one could reach them to damage their economy. And yes, Alexander the Great was pretty Chad. He did a lot of really, really funny things, and he ended up dying because he wanted to eat shellfish when they were out of season and insisted on having them anyway. And he was the big guy. So he got what he wanted. Lethal shellfish that were out of date. But no, Alexander the Great is another well-documented figure because he did a lot of really interesting things. I've gotten on a tangent back with history. I'm trying to think of more stupid shit my coworkers have done that I can actually tell. A lot of the stories that come to mind, the reason this is difficult for me is I just can't tell a lot of these stories. A lot of them don't make sense without context that I just can't safely provide, unfortunately. You love the story of Rome trying to get to Ireland. They saw how barbaric England was, looked across the water and thought, nah, fuck that. Yeah, for real. Shame Jesus didn't become a warlord. Would have destroyed the pesky tea sippers. Yeah. I mean, England has been conquered a few times. For example, England, one of the primary language of England for a while was actually French. So as much as we meme hate the French, sucks to be you, Britain. You were briefly a part of France. How does it feel? One of your favorite college classes was all about Big Alex. You wrote a 20-page paper on the use of animals in his campaign. Yeah, Alexander the Great. The reason him and Julius Caesar are so well studied is because there's so much written about them that you can cover so many research topics just focused on them. Unlike a lot of smaller historical figures who they just, yeah, they got up to some wild BS. But there was just not nearly as many records. Although there are some, like, there are some funny notes, like Ian Asir, the copper seller, who a lot of people know about because of Tumblr. And also, there was, on a really tall Scandinavian mountain, there was a couple of runes written in a cave that was thought to be basically inaccessible. And they were trying to translate it for a long time. They were like, surely this is some sort of religious meaning. No one could have easily gotten up here. This was an incredibly dangerous mountain with modern day technology. What did they write up here? And when they finally translated the runes, it just said, this is really high. Which they're not wrong. The only class you got less in an A in, but it was fun, so whatever. Yeah, history can be really, really fun if you frame it the right way. For the reason apps like TikTok are fun. And like, hear me out, let me cook. People doing dumb shit. TikTok just lets us see people do dumb shit in the modern day in real time. History lets us see people do really impactful dumb shit that people thought was dumb enough to write down. Like, there was like the cavalry charge where they used a cavalry to take a navy. Like the one guy in World War One who, while unarmed and out of bullets, single-handedly captured a German tank company. Ian Asir will never be forgotten nor forgiven. It's funny to think that more people alive today right now know about Ian Asir than the entire population of the world when Ian Asir was alive. That is the power of the internet. The internet is something we massively take for granted. It is so insanely cool. One time your chip shot flooded because some dumbass put a bucket in the sink while it was running, blocking the drain. Yes, sir, at least it was a chip shop rather than a ship. A lot of there have been a couple ships that sunk because one random crew member, like their girlfriend, broke up with them, so they lit a fire. And then there are a couple other ships that got sunk because crewmen really wanted a day off work to spend the time in the port, so they lit a fire. And then there's the Eugen, the Prinz Eugen, which was... I'm not going to go into the Prinz Eugen's life. Just her death. So after World War II, America really needed to test the effect of nuclear bombs. So they got a whole bunch of like enemy ships that were due to be retired. And we're like, bet, let's test how nukes fare against seafaring vessels. There were like 100 ships. The Prinz Eugen and one other ship survived everything they threw at it. And by everything I threw at it, I mean the Prinz Eugen got nuked twice, shot with a couple hundred shells from battleships, torpedoed multiple times, air-to-surface missiled, and then was still fine despite being Swiss cheese, so they had to board the radiated waste and set depth charges to manually... I forget the term, but manually destroy the ship from the inside. There's a specific term for it, I'm just forgetting at the moment. Who the hell is Ian Asir? So, Ian Asir was from ancient Sumeru. Sumeru was a really, really, really old civilization to the point where most people haven't even heard of it. And it's where the story of Gilgamesh comes from, if you know that story. So really, really old civilization. And he was essentially a fraudulent copper salesman who, for whatever reason, whenever he received a clay tablet complaining about people's orders, would keep it. Because he thought it was funny. He thought it was really funny that people would send in these complaints, and he just had a collection of them. So... because they were carved into clay, and because of just the various circumstances of how his house got, like, destroyed, I forget the exact specifics, most of the clay tablets were preserved. So because we know the language now, we were able to translate them. And it was just a couple hundred tablets of people bitching about this copper salesman who gave them subpar copper, delivered late, scammed them out of way too much money, and all of that jazz. So Gilgamesh, who supposedly, like, brought an end to multiple gods and ruled the land of Sumeru for centuries, is roughly as famous as a scammer who is a copper salesman. And people memed the hell out of it because it's very, very funny. Battleships are just built different. Yes, Prince Eugen was a heavy cruiser, but battleships and heavy cruisers are built different. Scuttle, yes, 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 thanks, Intium. That's the term I was looking for. I thought that was the term, and then I thought Scuttle Crab from League of Legends, and I was like, no, surely it's surely it's something else. A merchant who sold bad copper. Yes, Ian Asir very notably sold poor quality copper and scammed people into thinking it was good quality, and would deliver late and would deliver partial shipments, and people would complain, and then he just kept all of the complaints. World's most famous lame copper dealer. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Oh, speaking of the topic of battleships, though, there are some really, really fun battleship moments. Like, the longest... Battleships aren't really viable in the modern day. I hope they make a comeback, because battleships are so hype. But there are so many fun, especially World War II. World War II was the first major war that was like super well documented from both sides. So some of the shenanigans that went on. For one thing, I will get off right off the bat. One thing that a lot of people don't know: the German Navy in World War II really did not like Daddy H, shall we say. They did not vibe with him. They were not members of the National Zionist Party. For the most part. Obviously, there are exceptions, but they were... So, like, a lot of people tie in the Army, Air Force, and Navy into one, but the Navy specifically did not like the Big H. So, generally speaking, they weren't Nazis on board the ship, for the most part. There are obviously some exceptions. Remember back in the early internet where people would have Hall of Shame pages on their Neo-Cities? No, I wasn't using the internet back then. I was old enough to, I just wasn't. Everybody loves collecting their hate mail. It is fun. Yeah, some of the shit that World War II battleships got up to, specifically, is just so ridiculous. Like, if you've heard the story of the Bismarck, very, very famous story, Sabaton made a song about it. They managed to sink the Warspite, which was the British... no, not the... Was it the Warspite? No, it was... No, it's the Queen Elizabeth or something. It was the British flagship of the Navy. The flagship of the Navy means, hey, this is our most important boat. A lot of our country's pride is about this specific boat. It's a really cool boat that everyone loves. The Hood, yeah, that's it, the Mighty Hood. The Hood was a really old ship, and the Bismarck managed to sink it. So they sent the entire British Navy after the Bismarck. You only know Warspite from one of those Boat Girl games? Yeah, that's very, very fair. And what's even funnier is the World War II German ships massively hit out of their weight class. Like, the Bismarck distracted the entire British Navy in the hunt for the Bismarck, but it was outperformed by the Tirpitz, her sister ship. So the Bismarck had a violent blaze of glory, taking down a lot of ships, doing a lot of damage, sinking the most important ship in the entire British Navy. And the sister ship, the Tirpitz, who was the other Bismarck class, which just means it had the same general blueprint. Usually the leader of the class, like the first mate, is named after the class, or vice versa. So the Bismarck of the Bismarck class ships, and the Tirpitz of the Bismarck class ships. It's a very general summary. So the Bismarck obviously did quite a number on the British ships, did very, very good performance. The Tirpitz sat in a frozen lake and never fired a shot. And because it was just there, the British had to devote a lot of resources to watching it. Because what if it moved one day? It's a battleship. We can't just ignore a battleship. They're really, really dangerous. So for the entire war, the Tirpitz was just kind of vibing, just like effectively beached. But because the British spent so much effort trying to figure out what the hell it was doing there, what it was going to do, is it a threat, is it going to start moving, we need to keep an eye on the Tirpitz. They wasted more resources on the Tirpitz than, like, by many times over than the Bismarck inflicted damages on the British. The destroyer Willie D has a wild history, both the unluckiest and luckiest crew ever. Oh, yeah. I haven't read as much of the American ships, just because there are so many storied American ships. The main funny ones are the Minneapolis, the Mighty Mo, Montana, and the Grey Ghost Enterprise. Those are the main ones that people know, because obviously. But Willie D is also super well known. The Enterprise was the bane of the existence of the Japanese. It got reported sunk by the Japanese 5 times, and every single time within a day or two would just show back up completely repaired. It would be like if someone totaled their car, and the next day they rode to work and their car was somehow completely fixed, like completely undamaged. And then they totaled it again. And then you show up the next day and they're back in their car, and they total it. And this just keeps going, and you're just like, bro, are you getting a new car? No? What do you mean it's the same one? Surely this isn't the same car. How do you keep crumpling it into a 1 foot square cube and then driving the next morning? Yeah. We got the Enterprise. Are you sure about that? Oh, that was like the Japanese versus the Americans, like, in a nutshell. There are so many stories from the Japanese sides of being like, oh, this must be a carrier group, and it was like a light cruiser with 2 destroyers. But they were fighting hard enough that they were convinced it was a major carrier group, when no, it was just 3 really weak ships just going head to toe with the strongest ships of the Imperial Navy. One of the goofier stories is the Mighty Mo, Montana, where the only battle it took part of, it was out of range, so the Mad Lad captain was like, alright, bet, I want you guys to manually sink the ship so that we can tilt our cannons a little bit further and yeet the shells further than they're supposed to go so that we can participate in this battle. They manually sunk part of the ship so that they could just shoot a couple extra kilometers. You imagine the carrier actually shows up, and whoever made that call must have shit themselves. Yeah, it was not a good time to be in the Imperial Navy, just as a whole. I mean, the whole idea of a kamikaze pilot. As weird as it is, the reason kamikaze pilots exist is the US's fault. The US's motto for World War II was, okay, we have a square inch of deck. How many anti-aircraft turrets can we fit there? And as a result, every US ship, like, individual light cruisers had more anti-air capabilities than traditional fleets. So anytime you got in the air as a pilot, you were effectively guaranteed to get shot down. So they were like, alright, well, if we're guaranteed dead anyway, we might as well use the plane as an extra missile. So that is where the kamikaze pilot culture in Japan during World War II came from. That is why. It's because the US had such a ridiculous amount of anti-air that the chances of you coming home was 0. It would be like you show up to play tennis against someone and they have a bat the size of the fucking arena. Like, you're not going to win that one. It's an uncontested W on their end. Didn't the USS Texas do that for D-Day? It might be the Texas then. The Montana definitely has a lot of famous stories. It might not be the Montana in that case. I do get a couple of them confused. I know it was one of their major battleships. They pulled kamikaze out of their side deck. No, some of the kamikaze pilots in Japan, like, actually mad respect. There was one guy who saw a torpedo going towards a rescue boat and just made the split-second call, I am going to crash my plane into that torpedo and die to save a few hundred lives. So, like, there were massive big damn hero moments for both sides, which is part of what makes World War history so interesting to read, because we have accounts from both sides. We can sort of look through the propaganda. And then the other general really fun one to tell, the Minneapolis. The Minneapolis lost, like, 1/3 or 2/3 of the ship, like the entire back half just gone, and made it back to port under its own power. So if you ever see those memes of TikToks of people driving cars that look like burnt out wrecks with no doors and no tires, and they're just casually chilling down the sideway, and you're in awe of how is that car still functioning, that was the USS Minneapolis. When it dragged itself back to port, missing half of the ship. It would be like if you saw someone in a hospital taking themselves to a room on crutches while missing from the waist down and still bloody. Like, somehow not bleeding to death out of sheer spite and getting themselves to the hospital bed because you'd better believe they're going to walk there. You remember a battleship got hit by land artillery destroying a turret and everyone in it, all guns proceeded to reduce the area the artillery was into a crater. Yeah, there were a few stories like that where land artillery would just poke the bee's hornet. They actually killed a few people, and then the battleship would just get pissed off, launch one salvo, and the couple kilometers that the land artillery was standing in just disappeared. If you want an example of how destructive battleships are, the movie Hacksaw Ridge does a really good job of it. If you look up Hacksaw Ridge battleship scene, you get to see, like, it's a 2-minute scene. It's just a visualization, a relatively accurate visualization of what if a couple of ships started shelling a section of ground. Like, just a couple of ships. Just softening up the ground. And it is a ridiculous amount of explosives. And that is roughly accurate. And if anything, understating what battleships can do. And it just leaves a massive, inhospitable crater. If we just floor it, the water won't be able to flood us. Minneapolis, 1950s. Outrun the ocean. Yep, for real. And it's not even like the US has a monopoly on big damn heroes. There's a really famous guy in Korea called Admiral Yi, who is effectively like the Korean equivalent of Jesus. That's how insanely impressive the guy was. I cannot do his story justice. It is so ridiculous, everything he went through, that it actually kind of beggars belief. But he is the reason Korea is not just part of Japan. Like, him individually is basically the reason. He's like Napoleon level chatting it up over everyone in every engagement. I cannot do his story justice, and there aren't any fun, like, really short summary moments I can point to like Napoleon. Napoleon had a lot. Napoleon was so goofy. Okay. Theoretically, the stream is talking about work stories. I get distracted very, very easily. I'm very passionate about history, including like especially naval warfare. Naval warfare is really, really interesting, especially because obvious. How can I say this without getting political? I won't give any kind of political take on this. The Taiwanese Strait is very important to both sides of the world because of the chips that are being created there, the microchips, which are really good for modern technology. Necessary. It is a lot more complex to do a landing operation onto an island than people realize. The last one was D-Day. And that went really, really badly. The logistics involved in it, rather. Very, very fascinating. I've chatted with a few historians and a few ex-Navy people I had the privilege of meeting who have been captains of their ships who just were willing to discuss some of that stuff with me. It was really, really fun. No huge showy wins, just constantly big dicking every encounter. No. Admiral Yi had a lot of huge showy wins. He unironically had multiple instances of challenging an enemy fleet of like 400 with like 10 boats. And winning without casualties. Again and again and again. It's more that, like, his dick was so big, you'd mistake it for a third leg, and you can't really bring up any noticeable moment of him being a Chad. Because he was just kind of a non-stop Chad throughout his entire life. Like, he is basically Jesus-level famous in Korea. That is the level of big dick energy we're talking about when we talk Admiral Yi. Okay, I think my entire brain is just devoted to history now. And I do want to pull for... I do want to pull for Arlecchino. So I might end the stream here so I can go dick around in Genshin. This was going to be like a short 1-hour stream about me talking about my coworkers, and it was an hour of me talking about my coworkers, followed by an hour of me ranting about history. History is really, really fun. It's basically just a grander version of the stupid shit you see on TikTok because it had a lot more effects and we know the results of those. So I think I will end this here for now. Thank you all so much for coming. I had a lot of fun. Hopefully I'll have some interesting stories from the convention to yap about when I get back, and I will try to vary up the timings because I know this isn't a great time for everyone. Good luck on your polls. Thank you so much. Have a good day, you too, Muffin. Thank you all so much for coming. I will see you next time. Hope you have a fantastic day. Bye-bye.